Today we'll be talking about how Hubble, which is the place I'm working at, how we improve our mobile development productivity with various tools, including Firebase App Distribution. So let's go through a few things that we're going to talk about today. So background. So some of you might know or might not know, Hubble is one of the new leading startups in Singapore that deals with digitizing the construction industry. So one of the few projects that you may have heard of is the Changi Airport, the Jewel Changi Airport. So yeah, the construction company that is building the Changi Airport, the Jewel part of it actually uses Hubble to manage their operations. So in Hubble, I myself I'm taking the lead in the mobile development team in Hubble. So this is one of our new apps that is meant for our construction workers as well as project owners and stuff like that. So this is called our Hubble app, that is a super app that contains a lot of different modules for various aspects in the construction workflow, ranging from safety inspections to quality to fabrication, etc. So this is a one-stop app for everything. So my team itself consists of 4 people. So 4 of us are developers. We work on various modules, as mentioned earlier on. And we have a few QA engineers and a product owner. So the tech behind it is that we are running on React Native. Yeah, we are not running on Flutter or Xamarin or natively, but it's actually built on React Native. We built different flavors since we need to do a lot of testing and cater for different groups in our organization. So yeah, that's particularly basic it. Our source control is GitLab, which most of you should be familiar with it. So let's go through some of the workflows that Hubble has used before and how we have improved on this workflow further down the line when we slowly get bigger and slowly get more complicated challenges. So in typical startups or small companies, we tend to build features when we need to. And of course, as developers, we do our testing. Once all our testing is completed, we open a merge request back to the main branch. And then once that's done, we continue working on other features as well. But halfway through, sometimes we get requests from QA because QA now wants to do some testing on the features they built, right? So what the devs need to do is to stop their development at the moment and do a build themselves. So this is before we had any sort of automation kicked in. So we had to build everything on our local machines because simply it is faster, it is easier to do it rather than building the entire pipeline to support that. So the developers will just follow what QA requests for a build. So we will just honor that request. And then once the build is completed, we just continue working on other features and continue testing and following the usual requests. But sometimes we have other stakeholders who ask for a build as well. For example, the project manager now wants a build for maybe an experimental feature that he wants to demo to clients or to show other stakeholders these are some of the upcoming features that you want to show off, but it's not ready for production yet. So now developers are burdened with the task to actually build that particular set of features, experimental builds out and send it to the PM. So as you can see from this workflow, is actually very destructive to developer productivity, because what we want to do now is we want to focus on building features and getting it out of the door and keep going forward with that. So we say, okay, we will build it for you, but actually we don't really like doing it all the time. So with this workflow, it comes with a set of problems. So one of the few things that I'm sure a lot of you will relate is that it's still building, right? So when someone requests for a build and you have to build it on your local machine, you can't really do anything else because it takes up all of your resources. And you would tend not to actually try to modify any code while the build is running on your computer, because mainly you don't want to introduce an intended change. Imagine you're working on a piece of code and at the same time you're building a copy for QA to test. You might accidentally commit or check in or save this codes that will tend to cause the build to fail or might introduce unintended changes. Another thing is that it can be a security risk as well, since these builds that you want to issue to production as well, everyone now has a copy of the same private keys to sign the app. So the other issue, of course, that we will have as developers is that you are getting bothered all the time, right? I'm sure a lot of you relate to this as well. Nobody likes getting bothered while we're in the zone. So you're just working on your code, and then suddenly people start pinging you everywhere to give you to create a new build for them. Someone from QA, someone from sales, someone from this and that. So it kind of disrupts your flow of thinking, right? At the same time, we also want to make sure those versions don't conflict with each other. So now you need to manage the versions yourself. You make sure you update the correct version numbers in your app, version codes as well. So all of this is all the extra overhead that you need to work on outside of your development time just to build a feature, right? So now your development time is impacted. Another thing is that since many people has been asking for a build, in our case, and different versions of the build, it can get messy. It tends to get messy over time. So end of the day, you might not know which build has which feature. Someone will come and ask, hey, what build, what features does this contain? Does this contain that and that? So now you have to figure out what does that build have. And sometimes if it's too hard to find out, all you do is just rebuild another copy, which again can be wasting time as well. And with the same thing, you will also get the problem where you don't really know what's inside the feature, right? So all of this can be an issue. And since everyone is building on their machine, so there tend to be things like it only works on my machine, or it worked on my machine but it doesn't work on the other machine. So what happens, imagine you're building you're working on some projects halfway, and now you need to build, but the build has failed. Did it fail because of your changes, or did it fail because of your teammates' changes? So suddenly your app is not buildable, and this can be a problem. Now you have to spend time debugging which commit actually broke the build. And now if you have new devs onboarding, right, you have a new teammate joining you and he now wants to run a build on his own, now he can't because it's broken. So it can be a serious issue. Another challenge that Hubble faces is that we have different environments, right? I'm sure a lot of companies have the same thing as well. We want to have a demo environment where we showcase some new features for potential clients. We have a test environment for testers to test on. We have our production environment as well. And all of these apps has to be sitting on the same device. So they are exactly the same app, just running on different set of features and different set of APIs. So we need a way to actually get them all in one device. So let's take a look at some solutions that we have. So the first solution we have is to actually, we can actually handle the multiple environments by using product flavors for Android, and iOS, we use iOS schemes and build configurations. So we know that mobile apps technically is run by a unique bundle ID, right? So for example, com.example.app1 or app2. So in order to have multiple apps in one device, we have to make sure that the the bundle ID or the stuff, it has to be different. So what we do is that we don't want to hard code these values and have different, and then you have to keep changing them all the time. So what we do is that we just use Android product flavors to help you out with that. So what we do is that we just apply an application ID suffix. And so now it's com.example.dev or com.example.test, like this. So once you have done with your product flavors, Android Grader actually generates those new scripts for you for these flavors. So imagine you want to now run a demo build. All you need to do is Grader W and then your assemble demo release, which builds a release version for the demo environment. So for iOS, it's pretty complicated. So it has to do a lot with your iOS schemes as well. So it's a bit more challenging than that, but it can be done as well. So the other problem which we showed earlier on was the app was still building, right? So of course we wanted to move out away from developers building on their own machine over to some sort of automation. In this case, we were thinking of using Fastlane. So what Fastlane does is that it allows you to automate tasks for your mobile apps. So all you need to do is just install Fastlane, and we added a few plugins together. We added a few ways to increase the version number and version name. So every time we release a new version, we increase the minor value. So we're using semantic versioning. So for example, version 1.0.0 becomes 1.1 for every major release. And patch, you increase the patch number, which is 1.0.1, for example. So we automate this entire process so that the developers now don't need to figure out what was the previous build number, and now they have to increase it manually. So here's an example of how we run it. We just, on the pipeline, we just run the bump, just increase it the version by 1 every time we need to do a release. And it automatically changes your version code, your version name, especially for your Android, but for iOS, it will change your info.plist to include those details as well. So this entire process can be automated for you by using Fastlane. So we wanted to solve another issue where we don't want to keep building for the QA, or QA doesn't need to keep asking us for builds. We have a nightly build that runs every night. So as long as the code has been merged and tested, it runs every night at 8. And here we can actually set different version names if you want to. And this allows developers to focus on the development rather than actually using their machines to build. So for Android, we're just using the React Native Community Docker Android image. For iOS, we delegate it to Bitrise. So a very simple approach would be something like this. We do our linting since it's React Native, so you have your JavaScript as well. And then we run our build and deploy for each environment, for each platform, I mean. So here we can see that we've actually completed, we solved a lot of problems here. One is to deal with a lot of the build automation issues. So now all we have left is this inner gap where how can QA actually get the APK or the IPA files that has been built for the users. So here is where Firebase App Distribution comes in. We want to be able to automate the deployment. So in order to do that, we use Firebase App Distribution. What does it do? It allows you to release pre-production versions of Android and iOS. So rather than you sending APKs on Google Drive or sending through Slack or sending through some other forms, you actually can just upload it on the Firebase App Distribution, and your testers or whoever needs to do can just download it from there. They don't have to bother you so much. So here's an example of the app distribution in the Firebase console. You can just go to your Firebase console and take a look at it. Here are some examples of the apps that we are releasing. So these apps are built nightly, every night. So the version code they're using at the moment is just the build pipeline so that we know which pipeline is the one that builds it. And in app distribution, you can actually set the type of testers and groups. So imagine you only want demo users to be informed there's a new build. You can create a new group called demo users and then add your colleagues' email addresses inside. Or you have set a group of testers that you can create a group, and you can attach it to the particular app itself. So every time a new distribution happens, these testers will be notified immediately when there's a new build. So here's an example on your Android phone. You open the App Tester app, and this is one of them. And if you take a look at the bottom, we include release notes as well. So you can actually add release notes to the app. So now the QA doesn't need to be bothered to figure out what features are already included in. So all they need to do is just search for the Jira ticket if you're using Jira, or any sort of way for you to track your commits or track your features or bug fixes that you have done. So with that in mind, our previous workflow can be easily fixed. We no longer need, we already offload the process of building and deploying from the developer to Firebase App Distribution and through your automated pipelines. And all the developer needs to do is that if QA needs a build middle of the day and it's not present, all you need to do is just press a button, and that's it. You can just continue working on your features as normal. So I'm sure this is much faster compared to our previous workflow. So let's take a look at some ways you can actually distribute your app that has been built, right? So once the pipeline has finished building your app, there are a few ways you can actually distribute it to app distribution. One way is to do it manually through the Firebase console. So all you need to do is just drag and drop your IPA or your APK in, and then just select your testers and groups and add in your release notes, and then they should get an email to download it. So this works pretty well for manual distributions, but since you're running on a pipeline, right, why don't we also automate this as well? So this is where Firebase App Distribution allows you to do that through the Firebase CLI. So you can make sure that you install the Firebase CLI in your pipeline machine, and then you can just easily issue a command to distribute as such. So we are distributing what you want, the IPA or APK. This is your Firebase app ID and release notes if you have, and what group should receive this new distribution. If you don't like using the CLI and you already have Fastlane integrated, then I would suggest you to use Fastlane, and there's a plugin for Firebase App Distribution as well. All you need to do is to install the Firebase App Distribution plugin for Fastlane and set up as before your app ID and the groups and release notes, and that's pretty much it, how you can distribute it. So here's an example of how you would use Fastlane to distribute an app. So you just run Fastlane distribute Android, and you just put in your details, and that's pretty much it. So here's an example of what happens if the distribution is successful. Everything's get uploaded automatically, and you're pretty much done. Now, Firebase App Distribution also supports Crashlytics. So what does this mean is that in case, let's say you finish building a feature and then now you run the automation build, right? And now QA is running some sort of test and it fails. So those kind of crash failures can be immediately recorded on Crashlytics, and it will tell you which app failed, right? So if you send a new distribution on the demo environment, then Crashlytics can inform you that, hey, something on demo actually have broke, and you're able to identify exactly which version that broke, and you can fix it accordingly. Rather than imagine your QA now tells you something's broke, but you don't really know which version that you have distributed to the user that broke. So this is a pretty cool integration as well. So in summary, we talked about two different things. One is the build pipeline to automate your entire build process for mobile apps. And we also have Firebase App Distribution. Now, them alone itself are pretty great, but when combined together, they help you in a lot of ways, right? So build pipeline helps you simplify your build process, delegate builds to the pipeline instead of the developers, and it is able to transition those builds over to Firebase App Distribution so that your testers, your stakeholders, different groups of people who need to use that is able to download the Firebase app, the copy of the app without the developers' interference. So with this approach, Hubble has managed to increase our developer productivity. We are no longer building copies through our machine. Everything is done through the pipeline and Firebase App Distributions. And QA now and the sales team, the best is that they don't bother us that much to ask for a new build. All they need to do is just go to check the emails or go to the Firebase console and check it out themselves. So I think that's it. Hope you'll enjoy. Here are some links that you can read more about it.
Wen Long asked, is this Firebase App Distribution free to use in Firebase console?
Yep, it's totally free to use.
Nice. That was a very quick answer. So yeah, go ahead and try it out. And then Jama asked as well, is it possible to get the pipeline example? Not sure if it's included in the links on the slide that you're showing now.
Pipeline example, not really.
GitHub Repo, for example.
Unfortunately, we don't have one, but since you're running on React Native, all we did was just you can go to React Native documentation. There is a section where you can build the app for distribution. All we did on our end was just to automate that on GitLab. Yeah. And I think if you're working on iOS, you can take a look at Bitrise. Bitrise, I think they have documentation how you can actually build your pipeline there as well.
How better is it compared to Expo?
In my experience, I usually eject out from Expo the soonest. Reason being is because we use a lot of native libraries, or we want to make modification to native libraries that Expo would not allow. For CI/CD, there isn't really much a difference. If you're using Expo, go ahead, you can still build your native versions of your app. Yeah, it's more on the, for us, it's more on the dependency management and whether or not we are logged into Expo. That was our primary concern, whether we want to eject out from Expo or not. But for CI/CD wise, Expo is not an issue.